Welcome to The Explainer. This is where we break down really big topics by looking right at the source material. And today our source material is probably the smallest you could ever imagine. So here's the big question we're tackling today. We're looking at this massive topic, but with a source that's incredibly tiny. Can just a couple of sentences, something you can say in a single breath, really hold the weight of an event that changed the entire world? Let's find out.
And this is it. Seriously, this is our entire source for today's explainer. Just two short sentences. And they're describing the very beginning of the most destructive conflict in all of human history. So let's unpack this. We're going to look at what these words say, but maybe even more importantly, what they don't say.
All right, so for our first section, let's just treat these sentences as if they're a complete historical document all on their own. You know, like a tiny miniature epic trying to capture a massive global cataclysm. You know, when you first read it, it seems so simple, right? It's just a factual statement. There's no emotion, no judgment, nothing. But when you really start to look closer, you realize that every single word here is doing an incredible amount of work. Each one is carrying the weight of millions of lives and the fate of entire nations. Okay, so now let's zoom in a bit. We're going to deconstruct that very first sentence. This is the one that describes the single action that kicks off the whole devastating chain of events. This right here, this is the trigger. It's just a simple subject-verb-object sentence. It's the kind of thing we all learned back in grade school. But in that very simplicity, it sets up this immediate, unmistakable power dynamic. You've got an actor, and you've got the one being acted upon. It's crystal clear. What's wild is that the grammar itself is telling a story of aggression. Germany is the one doing something, the agent taking action. And Poland? Poland is the one receiving that action. The structure of the sentence is just as clear and direct as the act it's describing. And really, it all hinges on this one single word, invaded. Think about it. It doesn't say entered or crossed into. Invaded is a word loaded with hostility. It means violation, it means aggression, and it means there's no turning back. This one verb, it's what starts the entire war. Okay, so let's move on to the next sentence now and see how this all builds. We're going from one very specific action between two countries to this huge continent-wide consequence. And right away, you notice this really fascinating shift. The subject of the sentence, it's not a country anymore. The subject is war itself. It's like the conflict has become its own thing, its own entity, almost like a force of nature that's now the main character in the story. So you can see this really clear chain of events taking shape. First, you have the concrete act, the invasion. That gives birth to this abstract state, war. And then that war starts to expand, almost like it has a life of its own. And let's just focus for a second on that one verb, spread. What an interesting choice, right? It makes the war sound less like a military campaign and more like a natural disaster, like a virus or a flood or a wildfire. It gives you this feeling that it's organic, it's unstoppable, and it's moving without any one person directing it. It just spreads. Okay, so we've looked at what these few words do say, but I think the real power here might actually be in what they don't say. So what's the story that's being left untold in all that silence? Just think about it for a second. This whole account is completely impersonal. There are no soldiers in this story, no terrified civilians. You don't see any generals or politicians or any individuals at all making choices. It's like you're looking at history from 30,000 feet up, where you can't see a single human face on the ground. Yeah, the text definitely implies a huge consequence, but it never ever stops to count the cost. There's no mention of the millions of lives that were lost, the cities that were turned to rubble, the economies that were completely shattered, or the fact that this would go on for 6 long years. You feel the devastation, but it's never actually spelled out. And this might be the most critical thing left out. These sentences give us zero motive. There's nothing about ideology or historical grievances or political ambitions. It's a description of what happened, but it's completely, totally divorced from the question of why it happened. So all of these huge, enormous ideas, they only exist in the empty space between the words. You could say the text is just a skeleton, and it's up to us, the readers, to supply all the flesh and blood from what we already know about history.
All right, so after picking apart this tiny little text, what have we actually learned? What does this tell us about the sheer power of saying less?
Well, by stripping away every single detail, I mean every adjective, every adverb, every drop of emotion, these sentences manage to achieve this kind of terrible, monumental weight. It's almost like an inscription you'd see carved on a stone monument. It's cold, it's factual, and it feels permanent. And that's really the key takeaway here. The text isn't powerful in spite of how short it is. It's powerful because of it. That lack of detail creates this vacuum, and our minds just can't help but rush in to fill it. We fill it with all the horror, the heroism, and the tragedy that we know the story contains. It forces us, the reader, to be an active participant. So that leaves us with one last thought to chew on. What this little explainer really shows us is how the words we choose, and just as importantly, the words we decide to leave out, can totally shape our understanding of an event. And it kind of forces us to ask a question about our own lives, doesn't it? When we simplify a story to make a point, what essential truths are we leaving behind in the silence?